Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.
Hi, I'm Vivian Crawford, and you are watching Conversations Across Time, the TV show that allows you to join us for imaginary conversations between historical figures from different times in history. I hope that you saw our show last week, and this is a continuation of that conversation. And joining me tonight is, of course, my dear friend and co-host, State Representative Babette Josephs. Welcome, Babby.
Thank you.
Seated next to Representative Josephs is Governor George Wallace. Welcome back, Governor Wallace.
Evening, madam.
Seated next to Governor Wallace is Mary Chestnut. Mary Chestnut was a member of the aristocracy of the plantation antebellum era. She is here visiting us from the Civil War period. And when we met last week, we were beginning to have a conversation about the food riots, the women's food riots that happened in the South. And one of the things that we talked about was, out of those food riots came the social services network that now exists, the safety network that exists today. So a lot of the programs that we're familiar with actually started from these ladies who decided that they needed to riot because they were starving. They were the wives of men who were serving in the Confederacy, and they were poor women, middle-class women, and there were some genteel women like yourself, Mrs. Chestnut,
yes,
who joined in their cause, who empathized.
Yes.
Governor Wallace, when we were discussing this, one of the things that was particularly interesting to us, looking back from our vantage point of 2014, looking back at how you as a populace, a Southern populace, would have felt about these food riots, because these people were starving. So that's just a little bit of background for those viewers who were not with us last week. And we want to start talking about this, about the social network, about what happened, what these women brought about. Babby, one of the things that was particularly interesting, and I'm sorry, Representative Josephs, one of the things that was particularly interesting to us is that we are now today faced with a similar situation. That's right.
An unraveling of the social safety net that protects people from hunger, from serious health problems, and provides public education for their children. All of that is unraveling now.
And that, of course, started with these Southern women. That social contract started with these Southern women who decided that they needed to riot in order to be able to feed their children and their families.
And then it was kept up over the years by other women who found that child labor was a evil they could get rid of, and they worked hard and did, and women who agitated for their own right to vote, and so on. So helping immigrants integrate into the society, all those things. And that's what women did, but they stood on the shoulders of their sisters and mothers who started this in 1863 in the South.
And keeping that in mind, Mrs. Chestnut, did you see a correlation between the women of the South, the white women of the South, and the slaves? Did you see any?
Absolutely.
And explain that, please.
The downtrodden. We were the downtrodden because, I mean, we have to understand that although I was born in the aristocracy and grew up in that, I didn't, what I saw was, and I spoke about this before, you know, it was gleeful to go and watch a nigger be hanged.
Yes.
And they were treated so horribly, as if they were not even human. And that, as a white woman, yes, I have been repressed, and yes, I see that, you know, especially in the South, during that time, we were supposed to do just one thing, and one thing only. As an aristocrat, I was to entertain, and of course bear children, which I did not. The correlation is that we were
There's certain parallels between
Absolutely.
slavery and the situation of women.
I would say
There were parallels.
I would say absolutely there were, and to a certain extent, and in no way do I mean to disregard the horridness of actually being a slave, but I was in slavery by society itself, what was expected of me, and
Well, certain prohibitions, you couldn't get up and go to law school. You couldn't get
you
hired
couldn't
by
vote,
Right.
which after these women that I was able to witness.
Well, here's an interesting thing. You also had to witness, and I guess to me it's particularly significant, you had to witness, maybe not your husband, but you had to witness that it was accepted practice that white men had a right, especially as a slave owner, to subject the women, and not just women, I think you pointed that out to us. It wasn't just women that they took advantage of sexually, but they were able to exploit these people because they were their property.
Well, therein lies the difference. I was enslaved by society itself. These people were enslaved by ownership. There's a very big difference
Oh,
there.
there's a big difference,
Of course.
but the parallels
The
are
parallel
pretty,
is absolutely there,
yes.
Miss Babette, absolutely. In no way
and
do I
the
mean-
modern women's movement grew out of the civil rights movement,
Right.
which you were not around to see, but you were governor, because the women worked as hard as the men, the women got murders as fast as the men, the women got beaten up, the women got sexually abused. And then they realized that the men that were in the South, not all of them, but enough of them, just considered them to be along for the ride, considered that they were there for sexual comfort.
Well, that's it.
And the women got tired of it, and that's what started the feminist movement of the second
amen.
wave.
Amen.
I would concur with Ms. Chestnut. I remember my dealings with other males in Alabama politics and in the old in the restaurants and the bars. There would be these stories about how our fathers and great-grandfathers would take untoward advantage toward the females in the slave community.
But see, Governor Wallace, I know that they took advantage of the slaves, the female slaves.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but let's understand this. It wasn't just limited to female slaves.
It was not, and that's
not told. We don't talk about that.
no, and that is the atrocity of a slave owner in that day. They took whoever they chose, whether it be a young boy and they sodomized him, or whether it be a man or a woman or a young girl child. And that, sir, is disgusting
I have
behavior.
heard.
So how
yes,
much
I-
has it changed?
And you know
much.
what? It really has not changed. I mean, right now we are having a discussion about what is happening to women and men in the military being sexually assaulted by officers, by people who are of a higher rank, and it's something that's been swept under the rug. I think romanticize when we think that it was only women that were sexually abused.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. But you don't create a lot of children that you can then enslave.
Yes.
If you're a man abusing another man. I mean,
Exactly.
You make a good point with that, but it's still it's an atrocity.
Oh,
it's
of course.
the power. It's the power. What you spoke
Of
about
course.
weeks ago. It's the power. What did you do when you were in power? And it's these people that have always been in power in one way or another, simply by being a man.
Exactly.
You had the power.
Exactly.
I would concur, ladies. I have grown up and I have performed military service for my country, and I have witnessed several incidences of powerful males, sergeants and officers, abusing their power over males and females of inferior rank, and I would concur that it has happened, but it has been excused by the fact that it is the military and it is a hierarchical system, and it is supposed to be accepted that some take orders from others. And
Orders are one thing.
Yeah.
I would agree, Ms. Babette, that
Militia.
I mean, rape is another.
Yes, and I think that we know, and our audience is certainly a lot more familiar with that, because at least now we're talking about it, and we have some understanding of this type of abuse going on. But there's another subject that I want to talk about when we talk about abuse. Mrs. Chestnut, when we talked about the food rights the last time that you were here,
Yes,
and the
ma'am.
fact that these poor southern white women were rising up against power
Yes, ma'am.
because they needed to feed their children. And I quoted the first stanza of The Female of the Species by Rudyard Kipling, because it does articulate the fact, and that poem is dedicated to the fact that we as women are charged with taking care of the family and providing for our youth and feeding our family.
Indeed.
And so therefore that's why we are considered deadly. We have to take a break. When we come back, I want us to talk about what is going on today. I'm so interested to hear what you have to say and what you think about Governor Huckabee's statement about when he minimized the significance of women, and while
He just insulted women,
he
period.
insulted women, period. So I want us to talk about that. I will give some background to our viewers, but I want us to talk about that. And I want, because you, Governor Wallace, at one time toyed with the idea of switching from a Democrat to becoming a Republican. And today, in today's society, the Republicans are the antithesis of understanding of females. They just seem to have no idea about how to talk to females or minorities. So when we come back, I want us to use that time to talk about exactly that. What is going on with the fact that women today are being discounted by one political party? It makes no sense to me, and perhaps you may have some understanding of that. So I'm going to ask our audience if you will please come back with us and hear this discussion regarding what is happening today and how it parallels to what happened during the Civil War, when in fact people were starving. Thank you.
Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across time.
Are you accusing me of taking advantage?
I'm accusing you of raping her repeatedly. That's what I'm accusing you of. She had no way to say no.
Conversations across time. Conversations across time. Conversations across.
Welcome back. Right before the break, I asked our guests if they would consider, during that break, talking about the similarities between what was happening during your period, your time period, Mrs. Chestnut, and the fact that women were rioting because they couldn't feed their children, they couldn't feed their families, and that brought about the creation of a social safety network to assure that people were not starving, that we had to come up with something. The government decided they had to intercede and make sure that the citizenry did not starve, especially when there was a war going on.
Yes.
Now, I asked about the similarities between that period and today because we hear about veterans returning home from Afghanistan and Iraq who, I think it's 22 veterans commit suicide every day because they can't find jobs, because they're unable to support themselves.
They don't have the proper medical care. They're suffering from all kinds of psychological and psychiatric traumas.
Yes, yes.
From the horrible experience of having to be at war. And
Yes.
a lot of them are homeless. Nice, very nice.
Yeah, and do we see similarities between that and what happened during the Civil War?
Oh, absolutely.
So now, given that, I mean, there are certain things that are happening right now. For instance, the government, Congress has decided to not approve the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill had always incorporated the food stamps provision. And that was that we were, as a nation, not prepared to see our citizenry starve.
Also, it helped the farmers.
And it helped the farmers. So what one political party has decided to block the inclusion of food stamps in the Farm Bill. So they want to subsidize wealthy farmers.
And the bigger farmers that are bringing in the crops that are the least helpful and the least healthy
Yes.
are the ones that get the biggest subsidy under the Farm Bill. And
Yes.
poor people, nothing.
Do we think there's a possibility that, given the shabby treatment of veterans and the fact that many of them can't find work, a lot of them are starving, and a lot of veterans are on food stamps, do we see any similarities between what's going on today, and what happened during Mrs. Chestnut's time period, when in fact,
Absolutely.
women rioted?
Without
And-
a doubt.
I mean, isn't that interesting?
I think what we have to realize is that in this generation, and what's happening now, sadly, in this present time, is that the very same thing could happen again. I believe that, in all honesty, that we could see that the power that reigns
Yes.
will actually control our food, that we will actually be fighting for, or you will actually be fighting for your foods. And the foods that are being manufactured, this thing
You can't eat
called
it.
the internet is an amazing reality. The information I have received is amazing, but there is so much information written about that very thing. And it's frightening to imagine what I lived through and saw that could happen again on such a large scale.
Yes.
But the main point that I was trying to make is that what you're saying about that they subsidize these Monsanto, these people
Yes,
with the
It's huge
genetic,
chemical companies, big food
with
processors,
no nourishment.
huge industrial farms. You know, those are what's subsidized, and they don't want.
And who's reaping the benefits?
Aha. the people who contribute to the folks that are in government and make these policies. It's interesting. I'm a Democrat. What can I say? I'm a really Democrat. And it seems to me, putting a few people aside, that most Democrats are in government to do the job for government. You know, they want to take care of people. They might have a different vision than I do, but they really want to take care of people. Republicans are in government to pay back the folks who put them there, and that's why they're there, and that's my feeling. So take it or leave it.
Now, Governor Wallace, at one time, you toyed with the idea of becoming a Republican.
They weren't so bad then.
And that's what I was going to say. How do you feel when you look at the Republican Party as it exists today, and the fact that you really wanted to be on the Republican ticket during the Barry Goldwater 1964 election? How do you view the Republican Party now? From your vantage point, what do you see?
I see the Republican Party, madam, as a total monstrosity that I have contributed to creating. I have been described as a populist, but I would call it a very false populism. By that I mean that I have diverted people's attention from issues that truly matter, like their employment and the well-being of veterans and the education of children. I have taken their populist anger, as you might put it, towards hating minority groups and women who asserted themselves. It is that sort of false populism that currently drives the Republican Party. Instead of going towards programs that benefit the common weal, the common well-being.
And what's interesting, though, is the Republican Party used to stand for advancing the interests of the less fortunate. I mean, that's how they came about.
Back in my day,
yes,
the Republican Party, they were the hooters. They were the rebel rousers. They were the ones who wanted everything that now it would appear that the Democrat.
Kind of a role reversal there over the years.
It's just an amazing thing.
I want to say something.
I would concur, madam. Mr. Lincoln would not recognize his party at all. He would certainly have no future in his party.
No, he certainly must be rolling around in his grave every time the Republicans say, and Lincoln was one of us.
Yes.
I want to ask this question because just last week there was a Governor Mike Huckabee, governor of Arkansas,
former
governor of Arkansas, and at one time considered a contender as the Republican nominee for president, made a statement, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it amounted to that the Republican Party, this was damage control on his part, the Republican Party is the party of women, and that there are lots of Republican women who resent the Democrats' characterization of women, and that they don't want to be, these Republican women don't want to be identified as the way that they're portrayed by the Democrats in terms of relying on Uncle Sugar, and I take that to mean Uncle Sam, Uncle Sugar providing them with birth control because they can't control their libidos. Now, on so many levels...
It's so amazing he knew
so
that
insulting.
word.
Yes.
That amazes me more than anything
That he
else.
knew.
A three-letter, three-syllable word, Huckabee. My God, he knew it. It's amazing.
I mean, because the Republican Party always seems to go back to this fixation that they have
with reproductive systems.
With reproductive systems. I mean, they just seem to be so overwhelmed with that. And when we spoke earlier, Mrs. Chestnut, we were talking about the fact that during your time period, yes, that women were simply controlled by men, and that we had these slave women who were subject to the whims of their owners. But also, let's remember that during your time period, there was no such thing as the notion that a man could rape his wife, because he could have his way with her physically, because she was his property, and there was no such thing as a husband raping a wife. There's no crime for that. So now,
that's till very recently too.
And that's to very recently.
From what I've
correct.
read, that is very true, that it has carried on through the generations.
But what's
Yes, it
interesting
has.
about that is we have this, there's, for some reason, these men in power seem to have a fascination with the...
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Let them go to a high school anatomy course and get it out of their systems,
Yes.
for God's sake.
Yes.
And let's talk about governing now, and not people's reproductive parts.
Yes.
I'm not
Really?
real sure of how that can be legislated.
But it can't be
you just
legislated, but
take them out of the legislature.
that's right. We want to
We
take
can't
our
change
bodies.
their minds, so we'll
I
change
just
their
don't
faces,
understand
right?
why they think it
Well,
can be legislated.
we want to take
Oh,
any
who knows?
discussion of our reproductive rights off the table.
Indeed.
Out of the discussion. And so I'm asking that because one of the things that we see happening is that the Republican Party seems to have no idea how to talk to women.
None.
I must confess that it's true. In my experience in Alabama politics, and dealing with members of the legislature and other judges, the conversation at off hours in restaurants and bars, what have you, the conversation concerning women can get a little, how shall I say it, raucous. And things about women are said in jest, but not fit for polite company, and that is I must confess, that is the level of thinking among the men I have dealt with in Alabama
Well, you seem
politics.
to be in restaurants and taverns and with your fellows.
Well,
talking
I
about
want to say this because, of course, this always happens. We get into conversations, and we bring up more issues than we're able to resolve. I know that this is a topic that ranks very heavily, very prominent with you, Representative Joseph. I am just so interested in your input, Mrs. Chestnut. And I think that at some future time, maybe we get to talk about this again. But as it stands now, we are out of time. And the only thing that we're real clear about is that the three women on this panel would like these men to stay the hell out of our bedrooms.
Amen.
Please do that. So this has been Conversations Across Time. As I said, we get together and we have these interesting conversations with people from different time periods, and what we normally do is just bring up more questions than we're able to answer. We hope you've enjoyed being with us, and please come back and join us next week when we'll be having more interesting conversations across time. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's been my pleasure to have you here, Representative Joseph, as
My
always.
pleasure. My
Governor Wallace, I thank you for showing up for the third time to be handled by the women here.
My pleasure, ma'am.
Manhandled.
Manhandled, yes. And Mrs. Chestnut, thank you so much for joining
My
us.
pleasure. Thank you for having
And
me.
hopefully sometime in the future we'll get together
That
again
would be
for
lovely.
conversations across.
Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.